Welcome everyone to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about The Penguin, Season 1, Episode 2. It's called Inside Man. So spoilers for the episode. And this was another interesting one. I thought this was solid, especially once I thought about it a little bit more. I think the episode does some smart things from character development, mainly with the goal of setting up what we're doing for the rest of the season, and the choice that Sophia makes by the end, where this episode had to do some convincing, it had to do some trickery to make us believe that the Penguin was good enough to manipulate her when she is constantly detecting other people's bullshit. She's constantly sensing that something's not quite right. And I think the journey we take through this episode to get to that point where at the end she's like, hey, let's work together. And he says, let's dance. I think that moment really pays off because they convinced me over the course of the episode of how he does it. In particular, you know, he kind of speaks to her twice throughout the episode. 3 if you include the ending, where she actually says, hey, let's do this. Let's take on my crime family and take over and whatnot. One is really early on in the episode, after the whole sort of double cross like heist thing goes wrong. I mean, we'll talk about. Well, technically, it doesn't go that wrong for Penguin. It goes mostly to plan with a couple of kinks. I'll talk about that separately though. But afterwards, Sophia comes in and she's kind of interjecting herself when they're talking about this and pointing out that all the current crime boss seems to care about, who is the uncle Falcone. He's the one who's come in to take over. It seems to be about the money and the product that they've lost, right? That seems to be the thing. She's basically shot down quite quickly by her uncle, right? He keeps her back after everyone else has left the room and says, hey, this is my choice about when to get revenge for Alberto. This is my choice of how to retaliate against the Maronis. You are owed the vengeance that you want, but it's my decision when any of this happens. And she clearly does not like that statement. She doesn't like being told that she has no say in it, that she's just not the one in charge. And immediately Penguin tries to talk to her, right? And this time goes absolutely horribly. He's not able to convince her of anything. She calls him on the bullshit every single step of the way. He says that he's on her side, and she says that's very convenient. All of a sudden that Penguin wants to support her. And Penguin's saying a lot of things that do come across as very thinly veiled attempts to like gain her trust and say, hey, I believe in you. You should be running this place, not the uncle. And she makes him hush there. So, hey, you can't let him hear you saying that. But she does not really reciprocate anything he says here. She beats him away with every single thing he says. There's great little bits of performance from Milioti when she's acting here, when she sort of makes little eyes at him. And it's all very much that I don't believe a word of what you're saying. You're just trying to. I think the phrase she uses is that he's grasping for every last shred of relevancy that he can find, and that maybe she's his ticket to that relevancy and importance, because there's maybe no future with everyone else. Because Penguin worked for Carmine, and with Carmine gone, he's kind of trying to claw his way to be someone important. It seems like Carmine was very much the person that kept him on. We're even reminded of that fact when he's telling Vic a story later on about how he got his first gig, which wasn't really for Carmine Falcone, but it was for someone who worked under him that got killed by the family a little bit later, and he ended up staying on. But he gained Carmine's trust, might be a strong word. I don't know if he trusted Penguin, but at the very least, he saw him as useful, right? That's something else he kind of says to Vic later on. So I think what's so impressive about this episode for me is how it then takes that first conversation between Penguin and Sophia and kind of like does both their stories separately, and then they both feed back into each other as it goes on. The entire episode starts with Sophia having this, I guess you'd call it a nightmare kind of thing, but it's more like a vision she's having when she's getting hypnotherapy of some kind with shades from Luke Cage as the therapist of all people. It seems like they might have a romantic history. There's a little moment when he's calming her down because she's really freaking out at the end of this dream, where she's in Arkham and Alberto comes to see her and says that he's going to get her out of there. And I think that's also a great little symbolic touch for the rest of the episode, because effectively what we find out throughout the rest of the episode is that Sophia was going to be important because by default, Alberto was going to inherit the crime family from Carmine, right? It was going to get passed down to him because he's the son. And because he was close to his sister, he was going to effectively have her on board as a relatively equal partner, that she would have been happy with that arrangement. She felt like she had power because she was close with him. And now, because he's not here, it's shifted to the uncle, and the uncle's saying she's not making decisions. The uncle's saying, you're not important. By the end of the episode, he's telling her, hey, maybe you should get away from all this. Go to Italy, relax for some months. He just wants rid of her, right? She's getting booted away. That's all they want. And she can see that. She feels like she's being disposed, that she's not like what she's supposed to be. So this idea that Alberto wasn't just the brother that she loved and cared about is that he was also kind of this lifeline that through him she got to circumvent a lot of the basically misogyny that's in the crime family. I mean, I know it's wild to think that a crime family has misogyny in it, but that's effectively what we're talking about here. She has a line in the last scene where she says, I'm not ready to let all these old men just take everything from me again and put me aside. So, that's a big driving force for her. And a lot of this episode, from her side of the story, is very much showing that, one, she feels like she's been given no respect or power in the crime family, and that they are ousting her effectively and are not taking her seriously as one of the key voices that should be heard. But also this idea that everyone kind of is looking at her like she is crazy, right? Both in the mob family, but also just in general. And there's a couple of funny scenes that actually show this. One where she's at the funeral for Alberto, and she goes over to the food, and she realizes that everyone's watching her and sort of glancing over at her. So she starts intentionally acting kind of crazy and stuffing food in her mouth with her bare hands. And it's just making her look a bit wacky and kind of like she's sort of giving them a show because they're watching. So the episode does a great job of showing how she feels like she's being mistreated, and how she is aware of how she's perceived, and how much she wants to sort of take that control back, which is kind of wonderful from a character perspective when you compare it to the Penguin, because so much of what drives him is that same idea. People look at him, they see this limping guy, they think he's a bit of a goofball, they don't take him seriously. That seems to be the sentiment. Carmine maybe gave him some amount of respect, but it seems like no one else really does or considers him to be a major player. Hell, the show started last episode with him killing Alberto in a moment of rage because Alberto belittled him. So much of who the Penguin is him trying to prove that he is important, that he is worthy, and he should be respected. I think a big part of the appeal of why he keeps keeping Vic around, even though Vic kind of messes up in this episode, not the only reason, but I think one of the reasons is that simply he is taking in this young, scared, kid, effectively, who is scared enough of him to show him respect. And it's the one person in his life that he gets that level of fear and respect from. So I think there is appeal there, but I do think there's a great comparison where both Sophia and Penguin, even if she wouldn't admit it, there's a lot of similarities between them and how they're kind of treated and viewed and aren't allowed to climb the ladder the way they want to, which makes them kind of unlikely allies. Obviously, in the background of all this, we know that Penguin's the one that actually killed her brother, which is probably going to cause a bit of a problem down the line. So you've got that first conversation where she doesn't listen to him at all. She calls him out on all his bullshit. And I think what's great in the Penguin side of this that leads into their next conversation is we get a whole sequence again with his mother. And I like the mother stuff in this episode a lot more. Not so much the scene itself. The actual scene with the mother's kind of whatever. It's just kind of there to set something up. But how it's used in the next scene is beautiful. So basically the mother was found wandering around by the landlord, and Penguin's paying him off to look after her. I say look after, keep an eye on her, right? He doesn't want to put her in a home, even though the guy suggests that. But he puts on a record. He gets a record out, some jazz, and he dances with his mother a little bit to calm her down. And then they go to the funeral, and he sees Sophia up in the the window, and he goes up to talk to her. And what's so good about this scene is that I think Penguin knows that he completely whiffed on that first attempt to talk to her and to try and build an ally out of her and sort of arrange something. And obviously, I don't suspect that he necessarily doesn't want to ever betray her at some point. I'm sure he does. I'm sure down the line he would like to take all the control for himself, or maybe he'd be happy like ruling alongside Sophia. Probably not, but like regardless, his first attempt at talking to her about it and establishing a friendship and saying, hey, I'll forgive you for that torturing last episode and we can work together because I believe in you and I loved your brother. And she didn't believe a word of it. But the second time, showing that Penguin is quite smart and that he has some cunning about him, is he realizes that she didn't buy any of it because she's really good at spotting fake. She's good at spotting bullshit. So what he does is he gives her some truth, right? He puts in some real things this next time he talks to her. Now, he does lie a bit as well, because he does say his mother's dead after he tells this story, which we know is not true. I worry for the mother's safety if Sophia gets betrayed by him and then finds out that the mum's still alive. But he tells this story, which I think we, the audience, can infer is true for the most part because of what just happened with the mum at the house. He put on the jazz record and danced with her to calm her down. And he tells this story about how when his brothers died, she was distraught, she couldn't do anything, and the grief was killing her. But then they went to like a jazz club or whatever, and they danced to this song. And after that night of dancing, she got better. They helped her grieve and move through it, and she became healthier again, and she was there for him, and she was stronger. And you can watch the performance of Milioti playing Sophia in this scene and see her eyes, and that she's not looking at him the same way she did the first time. Because there's genuine truth and emotion in what he's saying, and he's being actually, vulnerable to an extent and opening up here, and it's stuff that she can relate to because he's being kind of like honest about something personal. You can see that she's at least listening to him. She's considering the information that he's parting. I love the line at the end of this where, he says you have to, not let this kill you, and like because the final thing he says is, it's always more fun to dance. Or it's a hell of a lot more fun to dance. And I thought that was a really nice line. Obviously, it comes back in the end. It's a nice setup and payoff for that final line where he says, let's dance at the end. But I liked it even on its own, though, because it was this idea of, like, just try to, like, tell Sophia, hey, have something that you can, like, work for, something that puts you at ease and makes you feel better. And what's so wild about this is that he is manipulating her, and he's doing it smartly because he's using a bit of truth. But it is, and maybe it is because he knows her so well that he's actually figured out what buttons to push. But from what we see in her side of the story, we know that this is hitting all the right things. Maybe not so much the being looked at as crazy. He does bring that up to her the first time he talks to her, but more so just the idea of like, hey, you deserve to be in charge. You deserve to be calling the shots, not these others that came in. And that is that desire that he's kind of exploiting, which, he also wants. He also wants that for himself, which is the little dramatic kind of, not irony, but whatever you want to call it. It's really well done, I think. So, when we get the other scenes with them, we get her, like, be shot down again. We see her feel betrayed by her henchman, which I'll get to why that happens in a bit. But she thinks the henchman killed Alberto, and the uncle takes the kill from her, right? The uncle just kills him while she's, like, working up to it, and she's pissed at him. So this just kind of is it's the punctuation, it's the exclamation point on the end of the sentence that's telling her she cannot make these choices for herself. And she makes a clear choice in that scene when he's suggesting that she go on vacation, that she plays along. She realizes that she's never going to win by just fighting him openly like this. She's never going to convince him of anything. He clearly is going to just play his cards like he always does, and she's never going to get anywhere. And that inspires the final call to Penguin, which is, I'm sick of these old men in this family taking everything from me. I want to take them down. What do you say, Oz? And he replies with Let's Dance, and he's called back to the earlier conversation. It's so good because I buy her decision by the end. They spend the whole, because she gets way more screen time this episode, and they spend it setting up why she's ultimately going to make this decision at the end. And by the end of the episode, they convinced me of it. It made it feel like a full episode that had an end of a chapter. Like, every episode should feel like it has a neat ending in the sense that it feels like a concluding chapter. No, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to tie up in a bow. It can be a cliffhanger, and this is kind of a cliffhanger in a sense, and that it's setting something up and leaving us hanging for it, but it felt like it tied the main theme of the episode in a bow at the end, and I thought that was really well done. I think It's hard with episode 2 sometimes, and you very rarely find an episode 2 that is better than an episode 1. Just because episode 1, everything's new, it's exciting, and they want to start with a bang, so they usually put in some of their best effort. And I think in terms of that side of it, yeah, episode 1 probably is still better than episode 2. But I think episode 2, from a character study perspective, is a bit more in depth. It's not as obvious at face value, I think, initially, like how well it's written. But when I stopped and started thinking about all the little things it did on this particular main central theme of Penguin convincing her to do this by the end and making it feel like it's kind of her idea, not entirely, but kind of her idea by the end. So I really appreciated that. I thought that stuff was like really well handled, and there's some other stuff to enjoy here as well. I really like the whole kind of heist thing at the start of the episode, which was Penguin goes to Milioti. Milioti's like, hey, I can just tell the Falcons you killed Alberto, and this could all end right now. But Penguin, kind of weasels his way into like saying, hey, or you could just, steal from this truck that I know is transporting all the goods, and I could be your inside man, and we can make out like a bandit. Of course, there's some tension added because he specifically says that he'll be in the car in the back, not in the truck itself. So just don't touch that car, so I don't get hit. Blah blah blah. But then, of course, Michael Kelly shows up and says, "No, this is your operation. You're getting in the truck." So we have to see Penguin like sort of like checking the mirror every 2 seconds to see if the cars are showing up to kill them, and like try to make sure he's not in the position to get shot. So he goes in the back to tell a joke. It's very fun watching him work and think on his feet. It's got a lot of like some of those moments you get in like a Breaking Bad or The Shield, even, where there's definitely moments in this episode especially where Penguin really has to improvise. This opening heist where he's not where he's supposed to be is one of them, and it's a very simple threat that you understand. And then later on in the episode, when he set up the whole plan with Vic for Vic to stash the diamonds that Alberto was supposed to have in Michael Kelly's car, and then he's going to like accuse Michael Kelly of being the inside man, the rat, and it'll set him up. And along with the fact that he's got photos of him with the Don's wife or whatever, like all of that's going to come together and make it look really bad for him. Unfortunately, Vic gets caught stashing the diamonds, so he has to think on his feet. And at this point in the episode, the way he's going to have his name come up is not for himself to accuse him, because everyone knows they don't like each other. He's going to have the survivor of the opening heist, who works for the Mironis, who Sophia's had kidnapped, although she never asked to have him kidnapped. She kind of just wanted information, and the corrupt cop they went to brought them a guy tied up from the hospital who's slowly dying. But Penguin goes down to convince him to give them a certain name, to give them Kelly's character's name. I don't remember his name in this. It's like Vito, what do I say? Something Vito? Where is he? Oh, he's not even on the main page in IMDb. Where is he? That's the plan. And then Vic calls him Vite, not Vito, Vite, Johnny Vite, right? So Vic calls him and says, oh, I couldn't do it, I got caught, like it's not happened. So Penguin has to come up with a new plan, and his new plan is to instead kill this guy, which immediately convinces everyone when they find out about him down here that because Penguin even has to like cause a distraction to go down and talk to him in the first place, so he kind of engineers that, which looks quite smart. But he stabs him, leaves, and then like everyone who was on that heist at the start or on the transport for their perspective is questioned and searched for a blade because this guy's been stabbed. But Penguin, you think, and the episode plays you a little bit because you think he's going to stash it on Vito's character, right? Or Vita's character. And he starts a confrontation with him, and you think that's what he's doing, but it turns out he actually planted it on Sophia's bodyguard, which is why he ends up being suspected and shot dead by the uncle. So, yeah. I thought all that was just fun to watch play out. There was some good tension. Both in the heist early on when Penguin's like in the wrong place and he knows he's in danger by being there. Also, every second he spent in that basement with the prisoner from the Miloti family, and he was talking to him and then killing him, I kept feeling tense because at any moment, like one of the Falcons could walk in. Literally any moment, any of them could. Especially since we know that like they're all talking about it now, like because he's intentionally dropped the information that they've got a Miloti down in the basement. So all of that stuff is fun to play out. It's kind of your set pieces for the episode. They're not big action set pieces. They're more. I mean, there's a lot of action in the heist, I suppose, with all the gunfire, but like it's more like a game of cat and mouse, I guess, for lack of a better word. But yeah, that adds some, that peppers in some fun stuff along with the good character development that I really liked. And there's a few other things to talk about as well. There's a whole sequence early on. This is when Penguin's telling Vic the story about how he got started in the business and how he learned to drive himself over a weekend because he said he could. Where he has the prostitutes come over. Well, I mean, I assume they're all prostitutes just based on the fact that Eve is Carmen Ejogo's character. But she comes over with a couple of girls and they're just sort of hanging out. Penguin ends up with her, and she's actually figured out what Penguin did. She's like, hey, you killed Alberto, right? Like, that's why you needed an alibi. And he has to try and calm her down and say that there's nothing to be worried about. We also have Vic get introduced to one of the girls who's a cam girl, which leads to a funny exchange where she says she's does fetish stuff like domination, and sometimes she works with cake, which is a really funny line to add on to the rest of that sentence. And Vic's, just asking quick. But Vic's got like a really bad stutter in this episode, and I don't think I noticed that last episode. At least not severe enough that I thought he just had like a nervous stutter. Whereas in this episode, there's like a moment here in this scene especially where he really struggles to get a word out. Notably, the neighborhood that he's from, which obviously is a traumatic thing because it's, like when he finally says it, the girl's like, oh yeah, that place got hit hard and all that Riddler stuff. And we even see Vic earlier on in the episode looking at like missing posters on a pole for people who are still missing from the incident from the movie. So I mean, I like that. It's just sort of in the background, building a little bit of Vic's character, and that he is very, very recently went through kind of a trauma. He's feeling lost in the world, and even Penguin at the end of the episode, when he's making Vic lie down next to the dead bodies, that clearly Penguin's been given this task by the family, but he's making Vic do it because Vic works for him. Again, it's basically threatening to kill him, or at the very least, like scaring him in a really weird, grotesque way by making him lie with dead bodies. But then when Vic promises to, try and adapt and all the rest of it, Penguin sort of lets him back out. I think, but like I said, in some level, I think Penguin enjoys having a character like this who does look up to him, who does see him as the boss. The first of many, I'm sure he's hoping for as time goes on. So yeah, I like all that stuff. I thought was really solid. I thought the pacing was pretty good. This episode was about 10 minutes shorter than the last one, and I think it felt just right. That felt just about right to me. And I get the first episode, you've got a lot to introduce. You have to maybe do a lot, some extra stuff and whatnot. But I did think that the one thing that let down last week's episode was it feeling a little bit on the bloated side. This episode pacing was in a better place. So. Also really cool. I don't have a lot of complaints. I'm happy to say. Like I was a little bit worried coming into this. Okay, you had your big bombastic opening, and that cool sort of night where Penguin sort of does this murder on the spur of the moment, ends up with an ally, and has to sort of think his way out of problems. But this episode like kind of made a mission statement. I mean, the end of the first episode kind of did as well, now I'm thinking about it, with Penguin sort of making his declaration to Vic. But this made the declaration with Sophia. Sophia, like, was obviously an interesting character in the last episode, but I love that this one spent a lot more time with her. Even that little moment in the car when she hears the people on the radio talking about how, like, the city's so hard up right now, they're letting lunatics out of the asylum. Like, have you heard about the hangman? And they're talking about her, and she wants to keep hearing it. She intentionally says leave the radio on. And they mention, I think she killed 7 women. Maybe the number's slightly off. I may be misremembering the number. But that was interesting that it was specifically a woman. I'm very curious. And that actually ties in one of the scenes at the funeral that I didn't mention, where it's showing that she is feeling the effect of people looking at her different and being scared of her, is when she runs into an old friend who acts really nice to her, who's like, hey, remember we used to go to Italy and blah, 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 blah. And she's reminiscing and she says, yeah, we should plan a girls' trip together. But as soon as this woman's daughter comes over, who Sophia's not met, presumably was born when she was in prison, like immediately this other woman gets protective and holds her daughter close, and it's very tense, and Sophia intentionally leans down and gets something out of her hair or whatever. And it's all designed to kind of see how this woman reacts. And the entire time, she is stricken with fear. And Sophia can see that. And that's how she's being looked at. And while I'm sure she wants respect of people, it's in a weird way, like this fear of her being a crazy killer is kind of like almost a mutated version of the sort of like fear that you want as a mob boss, right? It's not the exact same. It's not the type she wants, but it's kind of, in many ways, I suppose it's kind of given the opposite effect that you would actually get from the fear that you get of being a mob boss. I guess the fear of the mob boss, at least, is presented as respect, whereas this is a lot more kind of cowering. But I mean, now that I'm saying this out loud, maybe there is something for her to kind of realize at some point. Maybe when she realizes the sort of respect that she gets from underlings as a mob boss is just a couple of notches to the left of what she got as like the serial killer, that maybe she'll wonder if this is what she really wanted in some capacity. Maybe I'm reading too much into that. I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing as I say that out loud and I think about it. And yeah, that opening scene with the therapist, it did seem to indicate to me that there was kind of a romantic history there. The way he was holding her and saying breathe in and out when she was like freaking out was, I mean, it was a little intimate, but it was like understandable in the context of like trying to calm her down. But then he kept holding her, and it felt like he was sort of staring at her a little bit, and there was a sort of awkward bit of tension. Not necessarily in a like he's been a creep kind of way, more in a this is a rekindling of something, and she breaks out of it because she's feeling uncomfortable, that there's a rekindling of a feeling. I love the line at the end of that scene, actually. To go to the title screen, he says, Sophia, you're safe, and she says, I'm not safe, I'm home, which is a great line to sell a very different type of home life, I guess. She's with a crime family. She's not going home to I don't know, pick your favorite sitcom family. She's not going home to them. She's going home to the Falcone crime family. Oh, I'll tell you what I've not mentioned yet. Another big guest star popped up in this episode. Avasarala from The Expanse. Yeah, I've not mentioned her yet. She was in the scene early on when Penguin's talking to Maroni, and then she has a one-on-one scene. Well, there's a crowd as well, but like it's mainly her talking to Penguin later on, when she informs Penguin that the guy that the Falcones have kidnapped knows who he is and that he's the mole. So it's in his best interest to stop that from getting out. Which, by the way, I suppose is something that might come up, is the fact that he ended up dead. Now, they'll probably just hear that, what the cover story is that it was Sophia's henchman that did it. But that won't make sense from their perspective, though, because they know he's not actually the mole. They know that Penguin's the mole. So are they going to blame Penguin? Are they going to assume Penguin did this? Or is Penguin going to spin them a tale? He probably will. It makes sense he would. But it is funny now, the 2 episodes in a row, Penguin's ended up killing someone in a relatively spur-of-the-moment decision. I mean, don't get me wrong, this one was a lot more strategical, right? The episode 1, when he killed Alberto, that was a moment of anger. That was a moment of passion. This was more strategic and like, okay, I'm in a corner, what are my options? This is the best play, and he does it. But it is funny now that he's now killed someone from 2 different crime families and is having to lie to either family about the fact that he did it. I don't know. There's a tangled web that is being weaved here that I am enjoying. I will say, if I was to maybe say something I was missing this episode, is that I don't think I found that much funny in this one. And that was something that I really liked about the first episode. Now, I'm sure, ebbs and flow, it'll come back round in the right way. With future episodes, I'm sure, but it was something I appreciated a lot in the first one, and it wasn't as prevalent. I mean, I guess the scene where Sophia's eating to like freak out everyone staring at her is kind of funny, I suppose. Yeah, there's a little bit of humor, but nothing as funny as Penguin just like giving up and throwing the body down the stairs. That did get a good hearty laugh out of me last episode. So yeah, I mean, I think that's most of the stuff that I wanted to talk about. Like I said, the big thing for me was developing a Sophia's character, what makes her tick, what she wants, what she feels she's being kept from, and that being the motivation for why she is going to go in with Penguin. And from Penguin's side, the idea that he recognized that he was failing with her and had to offer something true, and the writers were smart enough to show us that that was something true with the previous scene with his mother. I thought all that stuff was really well done, and makes me excited for their continuing relationship and wherever that might take us. But cool. So there you go. That's Penguin episode 2. You can, of course, like, subscribe. Let me know what you thought of the episode down in the comments. And of course, you can support all the content either over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and help keep all the reviews coming. Or if you want to, YouTube membership's also an option. But check out MailFuzz Movies, the other YouTube channel for all the movie podcasts, which, amongst other things, has a review of the Batman that might be relevant that I did with David, who's on a couple of the movie shows. So thank you very much. I will see you guys next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?